Hello, this is another installment in the Tantric Studies program today on basic sanity. Okay, so we're going to cover this topic in a fair amount of depth as far as breadth, and we'll try to dive deep in a few areas as well, because this topic is really crucial to anybody wanting to live a full life just as a human being, but especially somebody who wants to spiritualize or realize the maximum creative, human potential in one lifetime. So without further ado, we'll jump into it. First, we should understand that this term basic sanity was not coined by our school. Chogyam Trungpa used this term basic sanity as well. I'm going to use it because it is English language, but I'm going to use it in the definition that we're going to use, and it's pretty close to what he would use as well. But for our times and our usage, we're going to define it here. And first thing to talk about with basic sanity is most of us know the term sanity, right? Even in Spanish, right? In cowgirl language. So basic sanity. So sanity we know. What is basic about it? Well, let's look at this first. It's not a psychological definition, right? In Ukrainsky, what is it? Sanity. You have sanity? Do you know that word? Sanity. So it's not a psychological definition. This is important first, because we don't want to get confused with whatever has gone before as far as defining human consciousness, human health, the mind, and so on, right? The psychologist view on things like sanity and so forth, they shift with time. They're debatable in the world of psychology. Just like the definition of the mind doesn't exist. No one agrees on a definition of mind in psychology. Also because most psychologists haven't actually worked with their minds directly, but work with the adverse effects of the mind. So in the same way, they don't really have a deep understanding of what we would call basic sanity either. Though any psychologist hearing this recording would say, that's great, that's what we're going for with therapy. It would be fantastic. So I think psychologists would agree for sure. And some schools of psychology now, they're becoming more and more steeped in Eastern non-dual traditions, right? This all started with pretty much with Fritz Perls, didn't it? And Gestalt and so forth, but moved on from there. And now it's getting quite deep. So there are some schools that would absolutely side with what we're saying and saying, that is what our psychology is, okay? But we don't want to limit it by any kind of, American Psychology Association definition of sanity. The other thing I want to stress is that it's not a definition that is culturally related, geographically related, or time period related, right? Cultural definitions of what, passes as basic sanity is very different from culture to culture to culture. We're just having a little joke talking about it. If you look at what a Brazilian person would accept as basically sane versus a German basically sane, you're looking at a very big spectrum there. Maybe the two ends of the poles, right? Two poles there, and a lot of movement in between. Americans probably somewhere in between, showing a lot of bipolar experience, right? So sharing some things in common with Brazilians, more loose and wild, free way of living, and some things in common with the tighter German way. So we don't want to look at that, because time periods will change as well. Changes definition. Same Germans, poking fun at my own people for a second, same Germans, if we go back to the time of the Roman incursions into Germany or Germania, you can see that they were a very different people. They were the wild bunch. They were the ones, that were definitely unwound, and the Romans were tight and really corked up, right? So they were more like the British, the Romans, compared to the Germans then. So time periods change our understanding of basic sanity as well. And then geography as well. What is basically sane in one place is basically insane in another place, right? In a desert, you can't act the same way you can in the tropics, and so on. They would be basically insane. So you're talking about, let's say, like, for example, Thailand. It's one of the 10 highest rainfall countries in the world, right? And because of that, they do not understand that water is drinking water is a non-renewable resource. So they waste water. So they're in the top 10 for the most rainfall, and they're also in the top 10 for the most water wastage, right? So if you lived with the Thai conception of the value of water in a desert, you'd be basically insane, and they would exile you from whatever community you were in, right? So we can't go by geography, we can't go by culture, we can't go by time period. So our exploration of this concept, it's really a living concept, that comes out of Tantra and is very important in our Tantric psychology system, energy of mind, of basic sanity, has to live and breathe on its own, unaffected by any of these fluctuations unaffected by common ideas, that come up, the new idea of psychology or the new idea of spirituality, unaffected by geography, politics, education, any of these things we named before, right? Time periods, cultures, right? So let's now dive into it and try to construct a little understanding of what this is. And it will be based upon the definition and understanding of basic sanity will be based upon more timeless human capacities and potentials that when fructify give a certain behavior, give a certain relationship to yourself, to others, and to the world. And this is what we're really looking for, yeah? Not cultural, okay? So, as we look at some of the parameters, the first one we should start off with is what we can call here clear view. So let's call the first aspect of basic sanity clear view. Now, this is a loaded topic. Is it possible to have 100% clear perception of situations ever in your life? Even if you're the most highly realized Mahasiddha person sitting in a physical body, totally enlightened, is there ever a time when you can actually say, I'm out of any consensus reality. I'm out of any conditioning that I have. And I see a reality that's actually there all the time. That everyone on the planet who's not sitting in exactly the same clarity as me is projecting their own reality onto that blank canvas. Is that a true statement? Can we say that that's true, or can we say that that's not true? This is obviously debatable. People will have different ideas about whether that's true or not. In our system, we don't try to say whether that's true or not. What we try to say is we use it as an orientation device, that we're moving towards this idea of a consensus reality without any projection from your own personal psyche, from your own personal conditioning. So we say we're moving toward that ideal, but we don't go so far as to say that the ideal exists. Because that movement towards that ideal engages us in the process of establishing basic sanity, of coming into full self-possession, another topic in this series, and understanding our correct and appropriate relationships to ourself, others, and the world. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. So this clear view idea, let's not, when I say clear view, it's a noun, it's a state of being, right? Let's understand it more like clear viewing, developmental, progressive, ever-clearing view. Yeah? Like this idea, okay? So, the first thing that we want to apply that clear view to, or understand it in relationship to everything, is in relationship to ourself, right? Do we have the ability to see ourselves? Now, this is crucial. In the spiritual traditions, clearly seeing yourself is a crucial capacity. And we can see how relatively immature a person is in their spiritual development by how little they can see about themselves, recognize about themselves, right? Even in the face of a lot of feedback from a lot of people, some people just cannot see their own limitations, right? So this is extremely important that we understand the clear seeing as relates to the self. And introspection meditation is a huge part of any Eastern meditation tradition, and it's a huge part of Western traditions of mysticism as well, and so on, craft and whatnot. You have to be able to know yourself and see yourself. So this tarka being investigation into the self, self-inquiry, was taken to another level in Kashmir at the Middle Ages in India. They were calling it sattarka, like the ultimate, the most essential form of self-seeing, self-reflection, introspection. So if you are a person who is deeply involved in the process of establishing basic sanity, and you're showing a lot of the parameters or signs and symptoms of having that basic sanity, one of the things you will see for yourself for sure is that you can see yourself. And you'll get that reflection from other people. Oh, wow, I like this capacity you have, Eric, to see yourself when you're out to lunch. And you can self-correct. Oh, like this, right? That is why in the tantric tradition, the utility of the teacher sort of can't be replaced. We need that teacher to look and show us what we just can't see because it's so deeply conditioned in ourselves, right? And this deep conditioning is what always limits us from knowing our true potential and activating and realizing ourselves as enlightened beings, right? So first, the clear view, the clear seeing capacity of basic sanity has to encompass seeing ourselves. Okay? The next has to encompass being able to see others in the world as a situation. So the situation that you're in, we have to be able to clearly connect to the situation that we're in. And this means that we also have to have a sense that our senses are purified. So in Tantra we say, for you to be basically sane, your 5 senses have to be purified. For your 5 senses to be purified, your 5 elements have to be purified, right? Earth, water, fire, wind, and space. Earth maintains the capacity, or a purified earth experience, or we should say, instead of purified, a deeply activated and intimate connection to your earth element without the karmic debris that can be related to the earth element is to have a deep, open sense of the earth element, which will be reflected in your sense of smell. Same thing for water. A deeply intimate connection to the water element, right? Where the water element's capacities are being projected from your personality display in your body and so on, without attenuation of karmas, gives you purified, quote-unquote, purified water element expression, which will then affect your sense of taste, right? Same for fire, affecting your sense of sight. Same for wind, affecting your sense of touch. Same for space, affecting your sense of hearing, okay? So a very important aspect of basic sanity is that our sense gates, right, and the nadis or channels from the sense gates to the objects, right, and the objects are purified, meaning your own debris of projection, of vikalpa, right, or sanskara or vasana. So vikalpa is a mental construct, usually held in the present moment. So if I have a mental construct held in the present moment, I may not really see this situation the way it really is, right? This is why many people, you know, well, when we talk about field agent training for the CIA, that kind of thing, people that make great field agents for intelligence communities, or whatever countries, not just CIA, are great field agents because they can walk through a room and afterwards they can be asked how many people were in the room, what position was each of their bodies in, what were they wearing, you know, what were the license plates of the cars parked right by, you know, and they just remember everything. They don't even remember scanning for it as they go through the room. It's just there, right? Their sense gates, making connection to the actual situation, is quite clear. Has to be, right? Because their life depends on it as a field agent, right? In hostile territory often. So there's a sense that we have to have that sense of non-projection entering into the activity of connecting to our actual situation. This is a very large aspect of being basically sane. Not for any purpose. Disconnect what I used as an example, a field agent for an intelligence community. That's not necessarily so important. But what you do with it, whether you're a craftsperson, teacher, martial artist, or whatever, flying airplanes, whoever, whatever you're doing, digging ditches, as long as that's there, that clarity of connection, that's one of the most important parameters for basic sanity. Now, you can imagine the amount of conditioning that we have coming through our senses that's lodged with, we can say in tantric terms, lodged with or associated with, conditioned into the expression of the elements, the 5 elements, right? Because in tantric terms, when the 5 elements are completely liberated from any limiting conditioning, what is the human experience? Rainbow body. The prakashakaya or jalu, you know, depending what language you're into, Sanskrit or Tibetan. The rainbow body, where the light just radiates, the 5 elements just radiate without the container, right? And you lose the container. So all of us are dealing with some, right, diminution of the full expression of the 5 elements. That's just the way it is. And that's normal for life. That's normal for life, not bad. This is the hard part. We'll go into Ayurveda for a second. Switch gears so you can catch this to illustrate this point. The 5 elements make up the doshas. Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. The dosha, the very word dosha, means refuse, garbage, the throwaway, the no good stuff, basically. You're like, but wait a minute, because it says dosha gives life as well. Wow. So it's the limitation of the 5 elements from their totally free expression that gives some localized, right, X, Y, Z access, time and space. All of us as human beings are just loci of consciousness and X, Y, Z axes, right? That gives a possibility for life to come into being. If the 5 elements were just radiating all the time, there would be no distinction of any kind of apparent objects in the world whatsoever. So we can't say dosha, the limitation on the 5 elements, is necessarily bad. This is life. It's not bad or good. So what are we talking about? We're talking about taking away those limitations on the 5 elements which we have added through contrived effort of conditioning. You say, well, I got passive conditioning. That's not my contrived effort. No, there's actually a sticking that we do, a grasping that we do. Even if it's pounded into us, we still have to grasp it. So we talk about that as some level of effort was maintained or used even as a child to grasp these conditionings. Now that's the part we need to differentiate and let go of from the 5 elements and the sense gates to be able to be having this clear view, to have basic sanity. Then we let go of that. There's the movement along the line of the mind flowing out along the channel connecting to the object. That has to be clear, right? And then perception of the object has to be clear. It means we don't form assumptive opinions about what the object is, what its function is, where it came from, where it should go, what it should be doing. And all that is not there. You're just meeting it as it is, every situation, meeting it as it is with clear view, so that you are just with it as it is. Make sense? Right? We were just talking about this funny thing, the clash of cultures, right? So you get the ancient cultures that had ideas of no land ownership, not even the idea of no land ownership. They didn't have the idea that you could own land. So they didn't have the idea of no land ownership, not even words for it. And then people arrived on their shores and said, I'll take this. And they said, great, because they didn't know what they were talking about. You'll take what? Okay, great. They didn't know, take what? Own. Yeah, sure, whatever. There's no way to translate it, right? Especially with hand signals. So he's like, I'll put my house here. It's cool with you guys? Okay. And then those people who arrived said, that means I own that land, you know. In fact, in their language, actually, there's languaging in all of the native traditions that say you're owned by the land rather than the other way around. So the fundamental perceptual field of both groups is very different based on their conditioning, right? You can make an argument which one is more based on basic sanity, which one is more based on natural arising wisdom, etc. But that's not our point. Our point is that both were conditioned in certain ways and couldn't see each other very clearly. Couldn't see their situation and couldn't see each other, right? I'm reminded of when the ships arrived, on the Westerner ships arrived on the shores of Hawaii, and the scouts ran back to the kings and they said, there's floating clouds coming. The king was like, wow, I want to come see floating clouds. That's pretty cool. What the hell's a floating cloud, you know? So they didn't really have a sense of what that was. Not that the Hawaiians didn't have huge ocean-going catamarans with sails. They did. But they looked so different. The color of the sails, they weren't bleached white, these big white billowy hemp sails, you know. So there was a huge difference. And it shaped different shape and so on. So they just didn't have in their whole field of perception what it was. So they couldn't even accurately identify it until they went out and got, oh, it's a ship, you know. So we have to have this clear seeing pervading our sense gates, and then pervading as much as we can our experience of ourself, our experience of others, our experience of the situation, our experience of the whole universe, really, for that matter. Okay? So this is the very first thing that basic sanity is founded upon. And remember, it's not going to be completely clear until we light body. So, and that's not better than this situation, right? It's not a goal to attain. So we're talking about a progressive dynamic of working with this capacity of being able to clearly view, right? As creating more and more basic sanity. So jumping ahead in the talk a little bit, it bears repeating now that in the 12-stage view, basic sanity is going to begin in what stage? 3, really. 2, the skills for it start, but still highly conditioned, so it's not basic sanity, right? moralistic judgments and so on. But 3, once that self-acceptance space starts coming in really strongly at stage 3, I can start to see without having to put my agenda on it as strongly. You'll still have an agenda at 3, there's no question. It continues up into what stage where it's an issue and then no longer an issue? What? 5's still an issue, right? Yeah, as soon as you get past 5, it's really no longer a big issue anymore, right? Yeah, very good. Okay.